In this lesson, we are going to finish our study of the trigonometric ratios. And so just as a review, remember that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So SOHCAHTOA, if you can't remember the ratios, you can just say that aloud. And so far what we've done is we've been able to take a ratio of the degrees on our calculator, and it will give us a side ratio out. So what we're going to do today is figure out how we can figure degrees out and also talk about how we use this in the real world. So let's start with a real world example. This is a treadmill inclined at 10 degrees and the walking surface is 5 feet long. So we want to know what the height is of the treadmill from the floor. And we're working in feet right now, so I want to remember that whatever I solve for h is going to be in feet. And what I want to know is how many inches it is from the floor. So that tells me at the end I'm going to have to keep going and do some converting. So which ratio would I like to use? Well, I want to work with this 10 degrees that I see. And if I look, I have an opposite of 10 degrees. And then this is the hypotenuse of this right triangle. So opposite over hypotenuse would be sine. So I'm going to do sine of 10 degrees is equal to h, which is opposite, over 5, which is hypotenuse. Now to solve for h, I'm going to multiply by 5. So if I take 5 times sine of 10, that will give me about 0.87. I'm rounding to 2 decimal places for my height. Now remember, this was 0.87 feet. So if I want to know what this is in inches, remember I can multiply by 12. So I'm going to take 0.87 times 12 inches, and that would be about 10.4 feet. Or 10.4, excuse me, inches. We took feet and converted it, multiplying by 12 to get inches, so 10.4 inches. Now, you have an example of a real-world problem to try in your notes where you're taking these ratios and applying them to something in the real world. The last thing that we're going to talk about is the inverse of sine, cosine, and tangent. Inverse sine is the measure of angle A if you're doing sine of A. Inverse cosine would be the measure of angle A if you're doing the cosine of A. And inverse tangent is the measure of angle A if you're doing tangent of A. So these are how we find our angle measurements, is by using the inverse of cosine, sine, and tangent. And those keys are located above the sine, cosine, and tangent. And what the symbol would be for sine is sine to the -1. Cosine is cosine to the -1. And tangent is tangent to the -1. So what the -1 signifies is inverse. Just so this makes sense, remember negative always means reciprocal. So that's like 1 over your tangent. So this is the inverse of tangent. So if I have sides and I am missing angles, and in this case I know this is 90, but I don't know angle X or angle Y, what I can do is I can find the measure of angle Y using what numbers I have left. So look at angle Y. What we have on angle Y is we have a hypotenuse here, and we have something next to, which is adjacent here. So which ratio gives us adjacent over hypotenuse? That would be cosine. So if I do the cosine inverse of adjacent, which is 8, over hypotenuse, which is 19, I will get the measure of that angle Y that corresponds to this ratio. So you type in second cosine, because I want the inverse of cosine, and then I just put 8/19 in with my division key, and you can use your ABC key, whichever one is fine. And then when you hit equals, we're going to round to the nearest whole degree. So this is going to be 65 degrees. So I know then that angle Y is 65 degrees. So you can find a missing angle if you use inverse sine, cosine, and tangent.